Hello and welcome to a special edition of the Game Informer Show podcast. On this special edition, we are going to be Skyping in the VP of Creative for Monolith Productions, Mr. Michael DePlatter, talking about his new game, Middle-earth: Shadow of War. The team's been working hard. We've been rolling out an entire month of exclusive coverage on the game with, features and gameplay and all that stuff, so definitely check out our hub if you haven't checked that out yet. But on this episode of the podcast, we got dozens and dozens of questions from the community. Questions, obviously, about microtransactions in the game, how the story works, whether it's canonical, details about the gameplay that Monolith hasn't quite revealed yet. So, without further ado, here's Mr. DePlatter. Michael DePlatter, welcome to the Game Informer Show, sir.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, it's nice to have you. I think you're on back with Shadow of Mordor, but who can remember? It was way too long ago.
I was back in the first age.
That's right. That was back when Talion was an innocent young soul, uncorruptible in everyone's minds. So we have a bunch of questions from the community. Obviously, I'm sure you've gotten a lot of this. Number one question by a mile is people wondering what's up with the microtransactions in this game. Can you just explain out of the gate how they work in the game, how you balance the game around them? What is the deal with microtransactions in Shadow of War?
So, the whole game that we built, like from the beginning, we've got this game that in every dimension is 4 times the size of what Shadow of Mordor was. So if you just buy this game, put it in, play the story, play the campaign, get into all the new systems, all the new RPG stuff, you're getting 4 times the game that you got last time. But then, additionally to that, we've also added this entire Elder Game mode, it's not really competitive, it's not really PvP in any way. It's more like adventure mode. So you can continue to potentially play with your nemesis system and your fortresses for dozens, hundreds of hours after you've completed the story.
Cool.
And at that point, that deep in the game, as you're really, churning through your orcs, or maybe you've built up your favorite orcs or your nemesis stories, then you have the opportunity, you can go into the marketplace, you can restore or purchase some additional orcs to bolster your armies. If you had a goal, you had like a particular way you wanted to set up a fortress or really customize it, you can go in and you can purchase orcs in order to do that. You can get training orders to customize and change some of your orcs to sort of build your army and customize it towards that sort of goal. And you can do that using currency you've earned in the game, so you can do it using Mirian, or you can do it using gold as well, which is a purchased currency.
Interesting. So I don't think I knew this. So this is just in the end game? It only opens up then?
It opens up during the story and the sort of second act, but also we open up lots of new features that we've got during that period as well. Like we open up the ability to put your fortresses up and play in the conquest mode and kind of customize and upgrade all your fortresses in that stage as well. But you can either jump in and do that, or you can bypass it and stay focused on the story, or you can, get through to the Elder Game. So I think, they're really there at a level when you've just got invested and you've just spent sort of so much time within the game that you might start setting different goals around how you want to upgrade, customize, personalize, really sort of craft your ultimate army, I guess.
Gotcha. And so you say there's no real PvP, but can you explain how that ties in then to some sort of competitive angle of like going up against, your friends' fortresses, right?
Yeah, we've really built that around the idea primarily of rewards. So the tougher fortresses you can defeat, the more your rank goes up. So there is a progression there. And the tougher your fortress and the harder it is for other people to beat, the more your rank goes up. And then by doing that, you're earning spoils of war. So you're getting other rewards that you can also use. So if you're just playing, you can also use that to go into the market and get, all of this awesome stuff as well. So there is a progression to it, but I wouldn't say it's not really, heavily competitive. It's really more of a ranking system. And the thing that we've aimed for, basically, it's kind of the opposite of pay to win on one level, because the cooler fortress, when you make a cool and challenging fortress, you're making content, you're making basically a cool level or a challenging level for other people to come and attack. So anyone who gets invested in really crafting and creating that content is making cool content for everybody that everybody can enjoy and potentially, jump on and assault that fortress.
Okay, so you're making yourself a target.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing we can make, like players are going to be able to make fortresses and battles that are going to be massively tougher than anything we could make as part of the normal progression of the game.
Okay, gotcha. Is there a certain aspect, I mean, we've seen this comment and people talk about microtransactions so much. Is it just in the year 2017 when you're making a AAA game, it's just going to be in there in some way? Just the market demands it at this point in the industry?
I mean, I can't, speak for any other games or whatever. I certainly know, that I've played a lot of games and have certainly at times purchased additional content like that in games that I've played. I do think, it is absolutely true. And again, whatever we say, that's going to be sort of flamed on. But I think it is definitely true that everyone now who's making AAA games, the number one thing everyone's obsessed with and trying really hard to do is increase the amount of playtime and increase the amount of gameplay that anyone gets from those games. The really thing that's common to all these massive games now is people want to keep them. We want to keep people playing these games longer, and we want to keep people getting more and more value and more time out of staying in the game and staying invested in the game. So whereas before, 10 years ago, people might have been happy to make a game with that idea of, okay, you play this, you finish the story, and it's 8 hours, and like, bye-bye, there's your $60 of value. You got 8 hours of playtime. See you later. We'll see you next time on the sequel.
Yeah.
Whereas now, people really want people to have a reason to stay around and keep playing and stay engaged in these games for dozens or hundreds of hours. So it is part of trying to give people so much more value out of their purchase and so much more time. And as I say, just the straight up base game, we're trying to make this thing a minimum of 4 times bigger than what we gave people in Shadow of Mordor.
Yeah, for sure. And you think having that living game, just a natural byproduct of that larger living game world, is just, it's going to have microtransactions in there. It just makes sense.
I mean, not to speak specifically to anyone else, but I mean, it certainly does seem that the bigger games get and the longer people stay engaged with them, that they're staying part of this community, the more that becomes a factor.
Yeah, for sure. Well, hey, other questions about development here. Tyrides says, what was the most challenging mechanic to develop in the entire game, and why? What was the one that kept you up late at night?
That's funny, because really the challenging thing is that we have this interaction between just so many mechanics. Like, we don't gate or prevent anything from firing simultaneously. So the dragon's coming in, the Drake, I should say. Everything's on fire. You're getting ambushed by 3 different nemesis. They've all got different classes. They're bringing in gangs. He's brought in sappers. They're running at you and exploding. You're summoning spiders. You're poisoning that grog barrel there. So you've just got, 20, 30 mechanics all interacting and all intersecting with each other simultaneously, and balancing around that, and then having to make that work with a gear system and a skill system where you can customize and change all your skills.
And imagine it's like a tech thing too, right? Like, you have a chaotic scene. All of a sudden, a Drake is breathing fire in the situation. It's like, oh man, what's that going to do to the frame rate?
The engineers, I mean, we're super lucky to have the Firebird engine and to have this brilliant in-house engine team that's totally building and customizing this engine just for our game. I think it would be very hard / impossible for us to get anything off the shelf and achieve that same level of chaos. So I guess to answer the question, what's the hardest single mechanic? It's chaos. Chaos is one of our mechanics, and it's a mechanic that touches everything.
Yeah. So you say Firebird engine. There is that passionate Monolith fan base out there that loves a LithTech engine, and how long you guys have been working with that. Can you explain, is this like the sequel to LithTech in general? Is it an evolution of it? How do you guys describe that?
I'm probably the most technically ignorant person here. Like, I just ask for crazy, impossible shit, and somehow by magic it happens. But it is the absolute direct continuation of the LithTech engine. It's just the version of that engine that's been customized and optimized around building this open world, third-person action RPG.
Okay, so a rebranding of sorts, but still you can tell that hardcore fan base, it still is basically the LithTech.
Absolutely.
Okay,
yes.
Cool. Rick the Lion Dan is wondering, what criticism from the first game helped you with the development of the sequel? Was there anything? Go ahead.
Yeah, there were two big ones. One really obvious one was the ending. We knew that as we kind of scoped the game and got it out, we weren't as happy or as satisfied with the ending of Shadow of Mordor as we could have been, and partly I think that's why we left it as such a cliffhanger. And this time we just wanted to massively overcompensate with the most ridiculous, epic, over-the-top, boss fights at the ending we possibly could. The other two, sorry, I said there was going to be two, but there's three, was getting repetitive over time, combat getting repetitive over time. And we worked really hard to add a lot of meaningful variety into the enemies and into the nemesis system, their classes, their abilities. So each fight is meaningfully different, and you can play it differently and plan for it differently. And the third one was challenge. The fact that for people who found the game too easy, they didn't die, so they didn't get the best possible experience of the nemesis system. And people who found the game too hard, so did die, the game just got harder and harder and ramped up. So at both ends of the difficulty curve, we pushed people away, basically. So making sure we had that hard mode and that easy mode and the challenge ramping up. And especially, going back, that not only did we have to maintain this variety, and not only did we have to maintain this challenge, we had to do it in a game that's 4 times bigger. So we had to make sure not only were those two problems improved relative to Shadow of Mordor, but they were improved relative to a much bigger and more complex game.
Yeah, for sure. Bob Buell, friend of the show, says, personally, I don't care for Lord of the Rings movies, not really a fan of Tolkien, but I loved Shadow of Mordor, especially the gameplay. And he has an interesting question. He's wondering, is there anyone on staff who just doesn't really like the movies or books, but still is developing this game?
I don't think we haven't sort of gone around and asked everyone individually. I think if we kind of got someone, put them under a spotlight, got the blowtorch out, we
prove you love it.
Yeah. Do you love Lord of the Rings? Maybe there'd be a couple of outliers.
I wonder, is it one of those things where you're just living in that world for so long, you will learn to love it, even if you're brought onto the team as maybe like neutral towards it?
Yeah, we'll have to ask. I'll get the. We'll go and interrogate everyone immediately after this.
Well, what about personally? I mean, I know you were a fan before you were brought on board at Monolith in general, but how much has your affection or appreciation for the overall world grown?
Like getting to actually be a part of it is just phenomenal. I mean, the thing I love it more. The thing it's made me think about a lot and look at is think about what it means to do an adaptation and do a game, and how do you make the best possible game that you can. And the world now is so full of high quality adaptations of every beloved IP ever. I think we just look a lot more critically at what is it that's critical when someone does an adaptation. What do they keep that represents the essence? What do they need to change in order to make it contemporary or to suit the medium that they're working in, whether it's television or games or graphic novels? So I think it's made us think a lot more critically and analytically about those sort of problems.
For sure. A lot of questions came in that were along similar lines, and it's a simple question, I guess. Do you guys consider this game canonical with Tolkien's world?
Yeah, I guess. So I guess the short answer is no.
Okay.
We absolutely change the timeline of things relative to the books. And the movies also change certain timelines and events relative to the books, like skipping the scouring of the Shire with Saruman. That's a big change.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd kind of say we're as canonical as the movies, which is to say we're not. The books are the books.
Yeah, that's a great answer, for sure. Then Tom is wondering, what's up with the orcs having guns?
Well, there's a couple of things to that. And again, it goes back to Tolkien. One of the big themes in Tolkien is the evils associated with modernization and industrialization.
Interesting.
So the orcs, the evil elements and the orcs within Lord of the Rings are always going to be more modern, more advanced, more technical. But at the same time, we absolutely founded their level of technology on things that were genuinely possible in the medieval era. So we looked at things like, Chinese rockets or Greek fire that the Byzantines had. So it's technically feasible, but it's absolutely advanced and headed in that direction that's associated with the evils of the modern world.
That's cool. And I guess I miss this. Is this like one faction? They have some sort of like
The flame
long-range
weapons.
thing?
There's also actually, if you go and in reading the battle scenes in Lord of the Rings, there's a lot of references to things like liquid fire and fire bombs and those sort of more modern weapons associated with the evil armies that do kind of evoke this kind of World War One trench warfare kind of feel to some of the large scale battles.
Yeah, great. So we're getting into some nerdy lore stuff, which I believe you're an expert in at this point. Darth Lord Revan himself says, okay, and a lot of people were asking something along these lines. So Sauron gave 9 rings to kings of men, but Isildur was corrupted by the One Ring. This means that there are 10 Nazgul and not 9? Unless Sauron gave away only 8 of the 9 and kept the 9th for future use? What's going on with this number?
Yep, so I don't want to give away. This is one... it's interesting because a lot of people assume we've shown too much or told too much, but there's a lot of things we haven't, that we want to set up. But there's 9 rings and there's 9 Nazgul. So, in the case of, and we know that the Nazgul were kings of men, but what we're playing with a little bit is the idea that sometimes those rings can transfer. So there's always 9 rings, there's always 9 Nazgul, but sometimes an earlier Nazgul might be retired. So they're sort of like the immortals in the Persian army, where there's always 10,000 of them, because whenever they die, they're immediately replaced.
Okay, so the idea of Isildur having the One Ring, he eventually swaps rings around in a way that makes sense?
He's corrupted by the One Ring, which leads to his fall. There's a nice little tease in Lord of the Rings that his body's never found, which is actually contradicted in Unfinished Tales, but we don't have rights to Unfinished Tales, so we ignore that.
Okay.
As you say, the canons, things can deviate. And then Sauron takes one of the rings of the 9 and puts it on Isildur to bring him back, because Sauron is the necromancer, and also to enslave him as a form of punishment, because he really hates this guy because he cut the ring off Sauron's hand. So there's a little bit of revenge there on Sauron's behalf as well.
Gotcha. Cthulhu 8 Diablo, of course, that's what that word says. Okay. Is wondering, is the Witch King of Angmar, the head ring wraith, also going to turn out to be someone important from Tolkien's lore?
Yeah, I think he's pretty important in Tolkien's lore.
But, I mean, do you guys have the backstory of the head ring wraith?
I don't want to give too much away, but we definitely want to leave some enigmas in there as well.
Okay, you're not looking to flip over every card in Tolkien's lore.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, and Tolkien said that as well. Someone asked, why do you draw mountains on the edge of your maps? And it's like, well, if I drew what was beyond the mountains, I'd have to draw some more mountains. Like, you always, one of the key things with, I think, any fantasy universe is there always need to be mysteries and horizons. And, anytime you answer something, you always then need to open up a new question as well. Otherwise, what you're doing is making the world feel smaller, which is, the last thing we would want to do.
Right. In games, you always need a skybox, no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, same principle. Shootist 2600 says, to what extent will other races, besides your companions and orcs, appear or influence your journey in Shadow of War's open world?
Oh, that's a good question. So the thing we have done this time is, in addition to our main quest line, we've also made it so that all of the side quest lines are built around the stories of different characters that you meet along the way. So Idril and Baranor and Eltariel, they now have much more fleshed out kind of narrative side quests than anything we had last time.
Okay, great. Ryan Porter's wondering, are there any new enemies to control or fight that you haven't announced?
Oh, interesting. Let me think about that. We certainly haven't. Yes. I don't know. I can't exactly remember everything we've spoken to, but certainly, I mean, the variety of the orc enemies is pretty unlimited. So, they've definitely still got some tricks up their sleeve.
You refer to the fact that, I mean, you guys have been talking a lot about this game, drumming up enthusiasm and whatnot, but I mean, you want to talk about those internal debates about how much to reveal? I'd imagine those are some pretty passionate discussions about what marketing bullet points do we need to hit and reveal ahead of time.
Yeah, what helps people, what helps set context and make the game exciting and interesting when you're playing, versus what really is a spoiler and could ruin an event of the story. I think were pretty influenced by the reaction to Shadow of Mordor. I mean, in particular, a lot of the grief we got on Shadow of Mordor, where people were complaining, was that we didn't understand Tolkien's lore because you couldn't just make Talion be this pure hero, and you couldn't have all these negative consequences around, or you couldn't have all these positive consequences around seeking revenge or dominating your enemies.
Yeah,
and it was, and then we had DLC 2 come out, which was the Bright Lord, where I think we were a lot clearer about what our themes were and what Celebrimbor was after and how it fitted into the lore. And then just reading threads by people who played that going, oh my God, this was amazing. And then just realizing that for some people, what we were trying to say or trying to communicate really only successfully came across that late in the game. So I think this time we just wanted to make sure that we did a better job of communicating what the game is about and what the stakes are and what the themes are and who Celebrimbor is and who Talion is, so that if we do a better job on setting that up, then hopefully the payoff when we do have the twists and the turns and so on in the story becomes even more effective and engaging for people.
Gotcha. I'm sorry for this next question, but George Ash is wondering, would you rather fight one Balrog-sized hobbit or 100 hobbit-sized Balrogs?
Definitely one Balrog-sized hobbit, because, I mean, it's just the laws of physics. If he didn't change his morphology and bone structure, he would just collapse into a gelatinous mass. Like elephants can't even jump.
Wait, is that true?
Elephants can't jump.
Okay, and
So
elephants?
a Balrog-sized hobbit would not be a threat.
He's also wondering, a real question, do you have a favorite part of Mordor to explore in this game? Is there one environment or setting that you still love looking at?
Oh, this is a real cop-out. It's like, which child do you love the most? But I love the variety of them. Like, actually, if I was going to pick, I'd probably say the city. Like, seeing this epic city of Minas Ithil that really does evoke Minas Tirith and that battle in Return of the Kings, like seeing that and then seeing that transform and become Minas Morgul, like as a Tolkien fan, I just think that's super cool.
Yeah, and it's something relatively new for you guys to create a environment that complex with a city, yeah. Trench Mace is wondering, will traveling between regions be done via a loading screen or through other means? How exactly does it work?
It is through a loading screen, and that gives us a little chance to update some, little story info and so on as well. But yes, as we load each full region, because they're so diverse, geographically, and everything from vegetation to which tribe is in control of the region.
Okay, and he's also wondering if you're able to go any place from the start, or is it going to be kind of like the first one, region by region by region?
At the beginning, you have two regions open, so you have Cirith Ungol and the city of Minas Ithil. So right at the start, it's already bigger than the total game of Shadow of Mordor. And then as we go into Act 2, we open up and you can go anywhere from that point.
Cool. Ben Hernandez says, how do you keep sieges from being repetitive? Just like capture points, kill orc officers, kill commander, take control.
Yep. The big one, I think, comes back to that first question, is making sure that the orc officers, making sure that the nemesis system is incredibly diverse. So I think the biggest dimension of variety in those is that you're facing a hugely variable number from 1 through to 20 plus nemesis enemies of incredibly varied power and abilities and capacities. So I think that the nemesis system does that a lot for us. And then there's the context of the fortress itself. What are its defenses? Does it have poison flooding out of the walls? Does it have ghouls everywhere? Does it have drakes flying around? So it really goes back to that chaos is kind of our biggest mechanic, and chaos manifests itself in its greatest form during the fort assaults.
Yeah, for sure. King of Wolves says, what is the exact number of fortresses in the game?
So we have the major fortresses. Well, it depends if we count Minas Ithil, because that's sort of the city, but that is a massive fortress. So there's the 5. There's basically every region is controlled by a fortress. And then also within each region, they have outposts, which are more like the strongholds we had in Shadow of Mordor, and there's generally 3 of those. So the fortresses really are completely additional in each region compared to what we had before.
Makes sense. Homie Knight is getting specific. is the currency that is used to buy Fort Assault upgrades given to a player at the rate that they will be able to buy all Fort Assault upgrades when planning a Fort Assault.
No.
Okay.
So there is an escalation. And I think there's definitely an escalation, and you can unlock increasing the size of your army, and you can have some choices between which upgrades you want to bring along with you. But it's like the skill tree, or it's like the gear. You know, there's a gradual escalation through the course of the game.
Gotcha.
And there's choices about what you want to spend your money on as well, because you might spend it. You can also upgrade your gear as well.
Yeah. How many times have you played through the finished version of Shadow of War at this point?
I haven't actually played through the finished version. I'm kind of looking forward to that, getting it home, because the game just gets so much better so quickly at the very end, because you're not doing anything except fixing bugs and polishing. So yeah, I'm actually really looking forward to just having my gold edition turn up, and there's something about actually buying the game and playing it at home, and just seeing it and playing it as if you're just a consumer and just a player. I'm sort of saving it for that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, what's the studio doing at this point? Are you guys working on a day one patch, or what's everyone up to?
Well, the game's done, obviously, but we've got super ambitious plans this time for supporting the game after launch. So we're making new tribes that come out. We're making the story DLCs that come out. So we're going to be basically incredibly busy for the next year at least.
It's going to be a weird crossing the finish line.
There's no break.
There's no break, but it's like, we did it. All right, now everyone, let's get back to the desk. Come on, we got a lot to do. These tribes aren't going to make themselves. Evanesco is wondering, are we able to control what our gear looks like? And can we use the look of one piece of gear for the stats of the other?
What's the word? Transmogrification.
Yeah.
We don't have that at this point, but you do. So I guess we don't control what the gear looks like, but the gear that you pick up is customized. So we have different tints, and we have different types of armor, weapons, capes, so you can customize your look. And then I think the coolest versions of those are the legendary sets that we have that you get by hunting down and chasing after legendary orcs from all of the different tribes. But then the cool thing with that gear is then once you get it, you can upgrade that through multiple levels as well. So kind of the ultimate gear is going to be the level 60 legendary sets, and they're going to look pretty cool.
Right on. Corvorotano says, are there more counters to range attacks than the first game had? The free flow-esque combat was really solid until arrows came into play in that first game.
Mm-hmm. Mechanically, it's the same. You've got to dodge, and the thing is, it's a tricky problem, because one of the main ways to encourage stealth and to make stealth rewarding in order to set up a combat space before you get into melee is to make sure you've dealt with the ranged threats.
Yeah.
And if you've done that and you've dealt with those guys first, stealth around, and you've got so many ways to do that. You can shadow strike to them. You can pull them to you now. So there's a lot of tools to kind of prepare the combat space before it all kicks off into melee.
Gotcha. Dapley says, in Lord of the Hunt DLC for Shadow of Mordor, you had an orc who could ride a grog. Can orcs ride grogs in Shadow of War?
No.
Why is that?
Because making games is hard. As if we had absolutely everything we could ever think of and do at once, except that.
Just tech-wise?
Yeah, yes. Because the problem is, so basically, probably shouldn't go into this much detail, but the reason we could do that in the Lord of the Hunt is because we could control it and we could limit it to a specific mission. Whereas now the nemesis system's alive, and those guys have to be able to do everything in every circumstance. So within every mission type, and in the sandbox, and in the open world.
Yeah.
So we couldn't control all of the edge cases in the full open world and the full sandbox that we could control when we just did it within that one mission. So that's sense. Why he was just a one-off in Lord of the Hunt. But we would love to do that, obviously.
Awesome. Well, thanks for giving us the real
great.
Answer. Yeah. Ryan Porter is asking another question. This one's bizarre, but I like it. Is it possible to go through the game without any orc followers?
Oh, that's interesting. I guarantee there's this amazing guy, Urux Hollow, who's done all sorts of things in Shadow of Mordor to manipulate the nemesis system, to have Ratbag turn up at the end. So I would my first answer would be no, but then I'm kind of thinking someone will probably work out a way to do it that we didn't anticipate.
Okay.
I mean, you do have to we do teach it through the course of the game. We tutorialize it.
Yeah.
So you're certainly going to get some, but they could die. You could storm a fortress as a one-man army, and it's going to be ridiculously tough, but someone's going to do it. And that's where I think that's interesting. Going back to the first question about getting to see what sort of fortresses people can make and how ridiculously hard they can make them by populating them with crazy nemesis enemies. Like, someone's going to one-man army the hardest fort in the game, and that'll be awesome for us to hopefully get to see on YouTube somewhere.
Yeah, for sure. And then he's also wondering, what happens to your conquered forts if you just terminate every orc that's stationed there? Can you do that, through the menu?
You could. Yeah, I guess we'll find out.
All right, that's what makes it exciting. Jacob Streisner says, can you pick and choose which orcs you'll have for the multiplayer component? Also, will your orcs permanently die in said multiplayer component?
So when you set up a fortress and it's shared with other people, you can never lose anything from that. When you're playing the game and assaulting someone's fortress, they can die just like they would die in any sort of normal element of gameplay.
Gotcha. Jason Daphnis has a question that's an interesting one to ask you. Why do you think the nemesis system hasn't been seen in other games? What's going on?
I don't know. You'd have to ask everyone else, I think. The thing I can say is it's really hard. From our point of view, we had the nemesis system in Shadow of Mordor 1, and our goal was, okay, let's take that nemesis system thing and make it way better. And that was an enormous amount of really challenging work. And I think, we're only on the beginning of that journey of what we would like to do with it as well. So it's definitely tough. It's not something you can I don't think it's something you can just say, okay, here's our game and we're going to tack this thing on. Like, we've really built the whole concept of our game around this notion. Everything from how Talion's death mechanic works to the fact that he resurrects like a ring wraith. So the death mechanics, the goals of the game in conquering Mordor, it's not something we've put into another idea. It's something we've really built the rest of the game around.
Yeah. You must have got a lot of positive feedback just being at DICE or GDC or something, developers saying, oh my God, that was an amazing system. I want to do something like that.
Yeah, which is always really flattering and, exciting. And we're obviously gamers as well. So it would, we definitely have our own ideas. Wouldn't it be cool if this was in, X?
Like another franchise type of thing?
Like another
franchise?
Yeah.
I think Ken Levine in particular seemed to hail the Nemesis system as the second coming of Christ or something along those lines. He talked about it so much. Must have been cool. BethesdaWare is wondering, will this be the final Middle-earth game from you guys?
I couldn't possibly say. It's definitely the final one we're doing this year.
Okay, but you have said the end of Talion's story, right?
We really want this to be a conclusive end to his story. Although someone the other day did point out that, there is always cheating death. I mean, how many deaths of Superman have there been? But we're not planning on doing that. We want this. Shadow of Mordor was a cliffhanger, and this isn't. This is like we're closing out the story that we began in Shadow of Mordor. We want it to have a really satisfying and epic finale, and we want it to segue into Lord of the Rings and those stories in a sort of elegant and cool way. Yeah,
and the studio, you're the masters of making games set on Middle-earth at this point, so it's a shame to waste that talent in the future, right?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Well, hey, that's it. Is there anything else you wanted to say? Any misconceptions throughout the month of coverage you wanted to clear up or anything like that?
No, I've really enjoyed watching the coverage. It's been really cool, and reading the comments and seeing it. Like, it's been great, and just having the print magazine's been cool as well. So
yeah, magazines are still cool. Who the fuck would know?
I know. It was nice. So cool. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, well, thanks for letting us invade the studio and create a month of coverage. It's been fun, and best of luck on the launch, guys.
Thank you very, very much. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And that's it for this special edition of the Game Informer Show. Thank you so much for watching or listening. If you enjoyed the interview, we'd always appreciate it if you sent it to a friend that's also looking forward to playing Middle-earth Shadow of War. Be sure to stick around for this Thursday, though, and we'll have another new regular episode of the Game Informer Show waiting for you. Bye, everybody.